At 4:30 a.m., Eastern Ukraine, the temperature plunges to -25 degrees Celsius. Wind cuts across open fields at 40 kilometers per hour, and more than 710,000 Russian troops remain deployed across frozen fronts. Trucks roll forward. Some have no roofs, some have no doors, no armor, no heating. Satellite images and frontline footage reveal soldiers transported in stripped-down Ural trucks, bare metal frames, open trailers, ATVs dragging exposed platforms. Every kilometer traveled drains body heat. Before contact, before combat. Instead, it exposed something far more dangerous. According to multiple battlefield assessments, Russian formations across Kupiansk, Liman, Zaporizhia, and Donetsk entered January with collapsing logistics, fuel shortages, ammunition delays, water frozen solid, medical evacuation stretched beyond hours, sometimes days. On one sector alone, Russian units attempted to mass 14 armored vehicles for a mechanized push. Ukrainian drones detected them before engines fully warmed. Thermal signatures glowed against the snow. Artillery coordinates followed within minutes. The attack ended before it began. Behind the front lines, soldiers resorted to melting ice in their hands. Plastic bottles cracked from the cold. Hygiene systems failed. Field clinics reported rising cases of cold-related trauma and disease before any exchange of fire. This was not an accident. This was not weather alone. This was a strategy built on attrition, numbers, and endurance. A strategy that assumed winter would finish the job. But instead of freezing Ukraine into submission, the cold turned inward. It stripped away illusion. It exposed a force stretched too far, supplied too thin, and treated as expendable at industrial scale. And then, the unthinkable happened. Winter stopped being Russia's ally. It became a weapon against its own army. To understand why this winter turned catastrophic, the conflict must be placed in context. The war pits Russia, a nuclear power with vast territory and resources, against Ukraine, a smaller state defending its sovereignty with Western backing. The primary theaters stretch across eastern and southern Ukraine: Kupiansk, Liman, Avdiivka, Zaporizhia, and the approaches to the Dnipro River. These are not symbolic locations. They are logistical arteries, rail junctions, and gateways to industrial regions. Since late 2024, Moscow's strategy has relied on scale, large troop concentrations, relentless pressure, minimal rotation. The assumption was simple: manpower could compensate for precision. Winter would amplify that advantage by degrading Ukrainian infrastructure, power grids, and civilian morale. Historically, cold weather has shaped wars in Eastern Europe. From Napoleon's retreat in 1812 to the Second World War, winter punished armies that lacked preparation. The Kremlin believed modern Russia had learned that lesson. Warehouses were stocked, mobilization waves were announced, official figures spoke of resilience. Reality on the ground diverged sharply. Ukraine entered winter differently. Its forces operated from prepared positions, reinforced shelters, and layered logistics networks. Western supplied generators, winter uniforms, and rapid troop rotation allowed units to recover. Small teams, not massed columns, dominated operations. Cheap drones costing a few $1,000s hunted vehicles worth millions. Russia, by contrast, pushed forward with mass infantry tactics. According to battlefield reporting and defense analysts, armored personnel carriers became scarce by late 2025. Replacement vehicles arrived slowly. Units filled the gap with civilian trucks, ATVs, and improvised transports. The contrast was stark. Cheap drones versus expensive armor. Prepared shelters versus open fields. Rotating units versus static formations. Politically, the stakes were even higher. For Moscow, retreat carries existential risk for the leadership. For Kyiv, survival defines the fight. That asymmetry matters. It shapes morale, decision-making, and tolerance for loss. Internationally, the conflict sits at the center of a wider confrontation. NATO views Ukraine as a buffer. The European Union sees energy security and borders at stake. The United States treats the war as a test of deterrence credibility under President Donald Trump's administration. Winter was supposed to simplify Moscow's challenge. Instead, it magnified every weakness. The escalation unfolded in layers. Not all at once, not cleanly. First came the logistics strain. In early January 2025, Ukrainian drone units intensified pressure on rear supply routes near Lyman and Kupiansk. Roads once considered safe at night were suddenly exposed. Thermal cameras picked up engine heat against snow-covered terrain. Tracks and fresh snowfall became guides, not obstacles. Convoys slowed, then stopped. Russian units reported fuel arriving hours late, sometimes not at all. Artillery shells were rationed. Water deliveries froze inside containers before reaching forward positions. Soldiers were forced to choose between movement and warmth. Fires revealed locations. Silence meant cold. Then came the first twist. As Russian forces attempted to regroup for a mechanized push near the Lyman axis, Ukrainian reconnaissance drones detected a concentration of 14 armored vehicles hidden in tree lines. Engines were running to prevent freezing. Smoke leaked from makeshift shelters. Within minutes, coordinates were transmitted. Precision strikes followed. The formation was neutralized before advancing a single kilometer. The loss was not just equipment, it was momentum. The second phase was psychological. Videos began circulating on social media platforms, not official releases, leaks. Footage showed Russian soldiers transported in open trailers attached to ATVs. No armor, no insulation. Wind tearing across exposed metal. Analysts noted this was not an isolated incident, but a pattern across multiple sectors. Another twist followed. To evade Ukrainian drones, Russian units began using vertical individual shelters, narrow plastic or metal tubes buried into the ground. On paper, it reduced thermal signatures. Underground heat dissipated slowly. From above, drones saw nothing. But these shelters created new vulnerabilities. Soldiers inside had no visibility, no mobility, no situational awareness. When Ukrainian infantry approached, occupants had seconds to react. Some drones adapted. Operators began maneuvering devices directly into openings, exploiting the very concealment meant to protect. At the same time, hygiene systems collapsed. Field reports described units drawing water from untreated sources. Sanitation broke down. Medical personnel warned of rising illness unrelated to combat. Cold amplified every weakness. A frozen supply line is more than inconvenience, it is systemic failure. The third twist came from manpower. According to NATO-linked assessments, Russia sustained average daily personnel losses approaching 1,000 per day in December 2025 alone. This was not confined to frontline assaults. Exposure, exhaustion, and untreated conditions took their toll before any engagement. Families inside Russia began to notice. Online posts from relatives questioned deployment practices. One father publicly stated that a single division advanced 15 kilometers over 6 months while losing thousands of personnel. The numbers spread faster than official statements could contain them. By late January, scenes near Huliaipole and Zaporizhia confirmed the pattern. Small Russian assault groups were captured. Equipment was mismatched. Winter gear incomplete. Faces showed exhaustion more than aggression. This was no longer escalation by choice. It was militarily, Russia's force structure is under severe strain. Western defense analysts cited by Reuters and Defense News estimate that Moscow entered 2025 with roughly 710,000 personnel committed to the Ukraine theater. Maintaining such a force requires stable logistics, rotation cycles, and industrial output. Winter exposed the gap between paper strength and real capability. Equipment losses matter, but replacement timelines matter more. According to assessments referenced by Jane's Defense Weekly, Russia's armored vehicle production cannot match the burn rate seen since mid-2024. When infantry fighting vehicles become scarce, armies improvise. Improvisation increases vulnerability. Vulnerability accelerates attrition. The economic consequences are equally severe. Russia's economy is estimated at roughly $1.4 trillion in nominal terms. Defense spending now consumes a historically high share of state resources. Reuters and Deutsche Welle report that military outlays exceeded 7% of GDP by late 2024, crowding out civilian investment. Winter logistics failures translate directly into higher costs. Emergency procurement, accelerated transport losses, and inefficiencies across supply chains. Energy revenues once cushioned these pressures. That buffer is eroding. Reuters recently confirmed that India's largest refiner reduced purchases of Russian crude to the lowest level in 2 years in December. Indian Oil Corporation turned instead to suppliers in Brazil, Angola, and the United Arab Emirates. The numbers are decisive. India had been absorbing millions of barrels per month. Every diverted shipment tightens Moscow's cash flow. This matters for the war effort. Fuel shortages do not only affect tanks, they hit generators, transport, heating, and medical facilities. A frozen soldier without power is not a frontline problem. It is a strategic liability. Socially, the strain is visible. Reports cited by BBC and DW describe growing unease among Russian families. Mobilization has become less predictable. Units are formed faster than they are trained. Winter magnifies dissatisfaction. When conditions deteriorate before engagement, morale collapses collapses early. Ukraine's position contrasts sharply. Despite sustained attacks on infrastructure, Kyiv has restored power grids repeatedly. European support networks now stretch across borders. Gas storage levels, emergency generators, and decentralized repair teams limit winter leverage. As Reuters noted, Russia strikes, Ukraine repairs. The cycle favors defense, not coercion. Strategically, winter failed to deliver what Moscow needed most: a decisive break. Instead, it drained manpower, accelerated equipment depletion, weakened economic resilience, and exposed institutional limits. This is not a temporary setback. It is structural damage accumulating under pressure. The consequences now extend well beyond Eastern Europe. For NATO, the winter campaign validated a core assumption: modern warfare favors resilience over mass. According to analysis referenced by Reuters and the BBC, Ukraine's ability to absorb strikes, repair infrastructure, and rotate personnel has altered alliance planning. Stockpiles of cheap drones, mobile air defense, and dispersed logistics now receive priority over heavy legacy systems alone. The contrast is stark. A drone costing $2,000 disables equipment worth $3 million. A generator restores power faster than a missile removes it. For the United States, the conflict remains a stress test of deterrence. Under President Donald Trump, Washington has emphasized burden sharing while maintaining military assistance. Defense News reports that U.S. planners now view Ukraine as a live laboratory for future conflicts involving peer competitors. Cold weather operations, electronic warfare, and supply chain resilience dominate after-action reviews. Europe's role is shifting as well. The European Union accelerated energy diversification after 2022. By winter 2025, gas storage levels exceeded 90% across multiple member states. New LNG terminals, pipeline reversals, and long-term contracts diluted Moscow's leverage. Deutsche Welle noted that Russia's winter energy pressure no longer delivers decisive political shock. Then there is China. Beijing watches carefully. Russia's growing dependence on Eastern markets changes bargaining power. As India reduced Russian crude intake, China gained leverage. Analysts cited by Reuters note that Beijing can now demand deeper discounts, longer payment terms, and strategic concessions. This is not alliance, it is dependency. The Middle East enters the equation through energy flows. As Russian oil faces logistical barriers, producers in the Gulf, Brazil, and Africa fill the gap. Shipping routes shift. Insurance costs rise. The global market adapts, but Moscow's margin shrinks. Looking ahead, experts outline several scenarios for the next 3 to 6 months. One path sees continued Russian pressure through sheer numbers, accepting high attrition while hoping Western unity fractures. Another anticipates operational pauses as logistics reset, risking loss of initiative. A third scenario involves intensified strikes against Ukrainian infrastructure, though winter has already proven this tactic insufficient. Across all scenarios, one constant remains: winter no longer works the way Moscow expected. Prepared defenses, adaptive technology, and global economic alignment have reduced the season's strategic value. What once froze enemies now freezes inefficiencies. What once crushed morale now exposes it. This shift matters far beyond Ukraine. It was supposed to exhaust Ukraine, break civilian morale, force concessions through cold and darkness. Instead, it exposed a different reality. Russia entered winter with numbers. Ukraine entered with preparation. What followed was not a dramatic collapse in a single night. It was slower, colder, more revealing. Logistics failed first, then morale, then credibility. When soldiers cannot be moved safely, warmed consistently, or supplied reliably, strength on paper becomes weakness in the field. Reuters, BBC, and Defense News all point to the same conclusion. Winter no longer delivers strategic victory. Infrastructure can be repaired, power grids restored, drones adapted, supply chains rerouted. The old logic no longer holds. For Ukraine, this remains an existential fight. Every repair crew, every generator, every drone upgrade reflects that urgency. For Russia's leadership, the war has become a trap. Retreat risks political collapse. Escalation deepens economic and military exhaustion. Globally, the implications are profound. NATO is learning, Europe is adapting, the United States is recalibrating, China is leveraging. Energy markets are shifting. Future conflicts will study this winter closely because something fundamental has changed. Cold no longer decides wars, adaptation does. So the questions now loom larger than ever. Will Moscow find a way to sustain pressure without breaking its own system? Will Ukraine's resilience continue through another campaign season? And when spring arrives, will this winter be remembered as a turning point or just the beginning of something even larger? Share your thoughts in the comments. If this analysis helped clarify the battlefield, subscribe for deeper geopolitical coverage. Turn on notifications to stay ahead of the next shift.